I rebirthed a new version of my life in a ladies' toilet, and my body just went, you are not living this lie anymore. I absolutely reject that. Grief is not the price we pay for love. Grief is love.
Hello Soul Surgery viewers, thank you so much for coming to watch this week's video. I am beyond excited to share with you this interview that I have done with the incredible Donna Lancaster. Donna has been working with human beings for 25 years. She began as a social worker in child protection, went on to train in Group Facilitation and Transformation. She is trained as a Hoffman Facilitator. She's trained in Constellation Work, an Imago Relationship Counsellor, and she is known as the Queen of Grief. Donna's work is all about diving deeply into the wounds that we are holding in our body, leaning in and healing and feeling it all as the gateway and portal to our greatest transformation and our capacity and ability to love and live in joy. It could not be a more apt conversation to be having right now with what is going on in our world. The top 3 greatest gifts that you will get from today's interview are how the very thing that we are running from, the very pain, the uncomfortableness that we are running from in trying to build our happy life out there, is the very portal to everything that we want and to remembering to who we really are, which is love and joy and expansion. Donna also speaks about how cultivating a spiritual practice in our life, being able to get on our knees and ask for help when we are at that rock bottom, is one of the greatest pivotal moments in our life, the humblest moments in our life, where a completely new possibility can come. So I hope you find this as nourishing and powerful and useful as I had. It was such a joy meeting Donna. So enjoy. Please do comment at the bottom of the video. Let me know if you have any great insights to listening to this interview, any big moments of healing. Share with me anything that comes to you and I will respond. And please do subscribe to Soul Surgery to support this beautiful work to go out further into the world and help as many people as we can come home to who we truly are. Thank you. Hi Donna, thank you so much for coming to speak with me on Soul Surgery. I know my viewers are going to be really, really looking forward to learning from you and watching this video back to speak about grief and transformation. You are
my favourite subjects.
You are known, or you have definitely been introduced to me as the Queen of Grief, which I think is an awesome title.
As I said before, I've been called worse.
Well, I think it's an amazing compliment, to be honest, because it's a huge, huge holding and something that I think every single human being can learn from and needs to learn about. So why don't you start by sharing with us, Donna, how did you get into this work and why does it mean so much to you?
Yeah, first of all, just as you know, Nicky, I'm having a bit of a hot flush, so my glasses are a little bit steamy, so forgive me if I keep taking them off because I can't see otherwise.
It's really fine. It's really fine.
Very human.
The more humanness we can bring here, the more permission to everyone else that they can be human too.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I got into this work, like many people, through my own struggles. And I've had a very varied career. I've worked in loads of different settings with loads of different people from all walks of life. And really, what really led me to be particularly interested in working with grief is my own so-called depression, having been diagnosed in my early 20s with depression, and then for 20 years on and off having carrying that label and not really understanding what that meant. And I was a really functioning, depressive. I had a career, I had a family, the car, the house, etc. But it was really me starting to get curious about is this really depression, or is this something else? And that's when I really first started to really understand that I wasn't suffering from depression, I was suffering from unprocessed grief. And that's really what led me to do this work.
Wow, that is a powerful opening to this interview. I wasn't suffering from depression, I was suffering from unprocessed grief. I've always felt the same, that at the root of depression is just a huge amount of unprocessed pain and emotion. So why don't you share with us, what is grief? Like, what is it, and why do we find it so hard to process it?
Yeah. So I mean, grief in its definition is a natural reaction to any kind of loss.
Yes.
So I always say that twice to let it land with people. It's a natural reaction to any kind of loss.
Yes.
And you know, I loved what I heard you saying today on your Instagram stories around death, that people think of grief as related to bereavement, the loss and death of somebody else they loved. Yes. And really, you know, not recognizing that there are so many deaths as part of being human, and that we are not taught how to process those deaths and the related emotions, grief that come with that.
Yes.
And that is what causes so much pain and suffering in the world. It is unprocessed pain, actually. There's so many layers to that question, and the answer to that question, as I believe, because I think we're not generally taught how to be with emotions. So generally our parents weren't taught, and their parents before them, and that gets passed down through the generations, of this kind of inability to be with anything that's considered to be, you know, negative emotions.
Yeah, uncomfortable.
Absolutely uncomfortable, and we're really, you know, we're in this culturally this trap where we label things as good and bad.
Yes.
You know, so these feelings are good and these feelings are bad, and so there's that part of it, the kind of passed down through the generations, the beliefs about emotional release and being with emotions and healing. Yes. And then there's also the societal brainwashing that takes place, you know, on a deeper level. We are being brainwashed to feed that kind of, you need to feel this, knowing that we can never just feel this. So the consumer machine says to us, only feel happy, only be beautiful, only be young. And of course none of those things are possible, because as you well know, you know, that we are so multi-layered, and also we're meant to age, and we're meant to grow, and we're meant to change, and we're meant, you know, on and on and on. But we're sold this package of perfection and happiness. And so of course when that doesn't work, because it's not meant to, then we have a bigger hole inside us, and then we buy more stuff, and we drink more stuff, and we snort more stuff, whatever our drug of choice is. And then so the cycle carries on, and that's very, you know, happy capitalists.
Yes. I knew there was a reason why we were speaking. You know, human beings are living in a perpetual state of survival, this survival of getting away from the pain to be happy. And it's always something else. It's something else, and it's something else. And we're just constantly looking out here to try and fix something rather than learning how to be with. And in the process, we're missing the life. And, you know, you said at the beginning, you know, grief is a natural response to loss. And to live also involves some form of risk of losing.
Absolutely.
To love is to risk some form of losing. So, you know, I hear you speak about the connection between heart, love, and grief. So, you know, behind grief is a broken heart. So can you speak about your process of healing, that through the grief itself is the transformation, is the heart? Can you speak more about that?
Oh, so we're going right in deep straight away. I love it.
Yeah, why not? Why not?
I love you. I like your style, Nicky. So, yeah, absolutely. The grief is a portal. It really is. And so many people, it's an access point. And so many people, because of all what we've just spoken about and many other layers as well, they don't want to go anywhere near it. So they'll do anything to avoid going through that portal. And, you know, as we know, with transformation, the only way is through. And all of these, and, you know, people talk about it being too painful. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to go anywhere near it. But as I say in my work, Nicky, with the, you know, thousands of people that I've worked with now, is there's nothing more painful than living half a life.
And avoidance, absolutely.
Than just existing, because this is the thing, is that people are so scared of the death of something, parts of themselves or another person. They're so scared of that, and yet they live like they're dead.
Yes, and it's the fear of the unknown, because if we let go, even if what we know is causing us so much unsatisfaction, unfulfillment and pain, suffering, the fear of not knowing what could be or where that would take us to let that go is so big that we'll stay there. We'll trade our life in for that.
Absolutely. And it's really, I understand it because I've also lived it. And yet, you know, and that's why I feel so passionate about my work, because it so doesn't have to be that way. And that really, you know, I always say to people, if you look really closely at your wound, if you dare to look at your wound, not around it, under it, over it, into it, you will see a doorway, a portal. And if you go through that portal, what lies on the other side is the gift. And so many people are not aware of this gift. It's like they're mystical somewhere over the rainbow, and it's because they don't know how to be with their own pain, go through, recognize it's a process, and then there on the other side is the gold, you know. And it, you know, what does that mean? It's different for everybody, but there are elements that are the same, because when you really truly do your grief work, you come back to your truth. You come back to who you are. It's about forgetting to remembering. You come back to a place where everything starts to make sense. And it's really that, from that place of authenticity and truth, and essentially love, that we are love, and no shoes or man or woman is going to change. You don't need any of that. You know, it's like, oh yeah, we're love, you know. And people like to, when they're still living in their neck up, as I call it, they like to be cynical and ridicule that. And that's okay, because when you're living here, which is very painful to just live here, neck up, is that's the safest way for people to not look at the portal. Is to ridicule it and call it woo-woo, and now you're hippie or whatever, all those labels. And it's like that's just part of someone's process, really, is the resistance and avoidance.
So let's talk about that, because I think that's a really useful topic, because most people don't know they're in avoidance. They don't even know that they're in resistance. They just think that's normal. That's just normal, right? So, you know, particularly when I look back on the big points of grief for me, when I've lost a baby, when my marriage ended, like big sort of life changes, grief impacted my body, it impacted me in so many different ways. So how can we help people recognize that there's grief there, there's processing there to happen that they can't really see? They just think that their behaviors or patterns are just the way that it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's really part of it is through the body. I mean, this is the thing, is that the body is so wise, but we have to stop long enough to listen, and we have to, you know, to be still long enough to feel what's going on in the body. But I always say, you know, the body it's so wise, and it's such a truth-seeking missile that it will eventually, you can ignore or deny or even be oblivious to your own unprocessed pain and your own heartbreaks, etc. But the body eventually will bring you to your knees. And, you know, metaphorically, and sometimes in my case literally, you know, it was a you know, when I really had a panic attack in the ladies' toilet at work, very glamorous, but I was actually thinking about this, Nicky, about how perfect, because that's, you know, you hear about these women that don't realize they're pregnant, and then they end up having a baby in a ladies' loo. And I thought that is actually what I did, is I rebirthed a new version of my life in a ladies' toilet, and my body just went, you are not living this lie anymore.
Yes.
And it brought me to my knees. And it was, I always call it Humility Street. I was nose down in Humility Street. And
Yes.
it was an awakening. It really was. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's so powerful. You know, when I think back, the same for me, every single massive gateway for me, my body told me first. And when we're in the body, we're out of the mind, and the body gets us back into the now, and that's where we feel. And that's where we get to start to actually heal.
Yes.
Yeah, I just don't think culturally we're taught about grief, and we're not taught about this, that it is actually part of life for things to end, for us, for continually letting go. You know, I remember when the tsunami happened, and because I'm from Southeast Asia, and I remember watching so many, my mother was in Malaysia at the time, and so many people from their local communities wailing in the side of the street at the end and the loss, and how it was just so natural for them to go there that quickly. And then very quickly, like within weeks, they were already beginning to rebuild.
Yes. Yes.
And I was like, wow, like that, culturally, that is such a different way to deal with life and death.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So talk to me about, like, when you're working with people, do you find that you have to kind of break down that cultural conditioning?
Yes. Yeah, with many people that is the case, and especially as well with men, because you've also got that into the dynamic, but around, you know, the softer emotions, etc. So absolutely, we have to break through those kind of, or the people themselves have to dare to kind of let their guards down enough to feel their grief. And like we just talked about, the access point is also the body. And so we do a lot on the Bridge Retreat, which is the work that I do now, is that we really support the body to bring the emotions up to the surface.
Yes.
And so that people can safely release them. So, you know, in terms of things like grief, you know, really, like you've just spoken about so beautifully, Nicky, like a real grief cry is primal. And it's not quiet. It's not quiet. When you really allow yourself beyond conditioning to access your grief, it is primal, it is loud, it is raw. And if you've ever made that sound yourself, you or you've heard it, it's really, it's like, it's animal. It really is animal. And so on the bridge, you know, people, a lot of British people, they kind of, you know, it's so hard, they're so conditioned to not make sound. And so we work a lot with sound, like getting people just through things like chanting and using the vocal cords in singing in different ways to start being more comfortable with sound, so that then they can start to really let out their own grief cry.
Yes.
You know?
And I think there's this really big fear, I certainly hear this a lot with the people I work with, that if they allowed themselves to feel it, it would break them it would break them apart. And I remember when I lost my second baby, and I actually allowed myself, I fully surrendered to the grief. And it did feel like it was breaking my body into pieces. But at the same time, I found myself, you know, grieving parts of my childhood, parts of things that I hadn't healed with my mother. Like, as I was grieving one thing, my loss of my baby, all these other things started to flow through. And then just in that moment when I thought my heart was kind of breaking apart, this incredible experience of love started coming through. And it was it's such an incredible phenomenon. It's hard to really conceptualize and to believe it can be true, that in the same moment of pain can be love. Like real allowance and freedom of pain can be love.
Yes. Because grief is love, Nicky. This is the thing that, you know, that saying that people say, grief is the price you pay for love. And I absolutely reject that. Grief is not the price we pay for love. Grief is love.
Yes.
You know, so in your example of losing a baby, you are honouring that spirit's life.
Yes.
By the level of your grief. You are honouring the life that had left, you know, is basically saying you matter. You know, you matter. That life mattered. And that level of grief is a form of love. It really is. And people just, again, they don't recognise it's not a price. It comes with the package of love. Again, it's like good feelings, bad feelings. No, love includes grief.
Yes, they actually create, one creates the other, and then it creates exactly. It's not replacing or fixing. And that essentially, I literally just wrote this in the book I'm writing, the difference between fixing and healing. Healing is something that grows out of something else. It's an alive, evolving process. They can't exist without each other. You can't come through the rebirth without having gone through the wound, and they have to be simultaneously present with each other.
Absolutely. And when your heart breaks, it also opens.
Yes.
You know, by very definition, a heartbreak is an opening. You know, and what many people do is they go like this because they can't bear it, and then they carry inside them heartbreak after heartbreak after heartbreak, and that is exhausting. Not only is it incredibly painful, but it is absolutely exhausting, dragging yourself through life with 10, 20 significant heartbreaks as part of the human condition, because we all experience loss. With nowhere, where do you go with that? Of course you go into depression, of course you go into anxiety, of course you go into all the physical ailments, you know, the IBS, the migraines, the lower back pain, etc. It's because your body can't bear that level of unprocessed pain. It's not meant to, you know. Our tears are there for a reason.
And the amount of energy it takes to keep it closed like that, because the heart it actually wants to open.
Absolutely.
So we use so much of our energy without consciously knowing it, just to keep it shut like that, and that robs so much life.
It robs you of your life force. And that is the thing, is if you've got so much pain in your heart, what people do is shut down. So then they have to live in their head, and then they either neglect their body or they treat it like a machine. You know, just because you go to the gym 5 days or yoga 7 days a week, it doesn't mean that you live in your body. That's the difference, you know. And again, it's like really recognizing that these are ways that people can avoid. If you don't really live in your body, you can avoid the pain of the heart, but only for so long.
And at what cost?
Exactly.
You know, I ask that always, because most of the time, almost one of those common things people will say to me before they take the leap to come and do the deeper healing is, how will I know? Will you give me the guarantee? Will it be okay? I'm like, well, actually, there is no guarantee. The only choice you have is to either choose to stay where you are or to take the risk into the unknown and not know, but it's and choose that it's worth it, because what is the cost if you don't? You know, when a heart is like held shut like that, you may be protecting yourself from the pain, but also nothing else can come in.
Absolutely. You become a closed system, and it is, you know, we are meant to give and receive love. It is that beautiful flow, like you were saying, it's this, you know, and it's like, how can that happen when you've, you know, closed your heart shut again and again and again? It just is not possible. And then people get into all sorts of trouble because they're trying to give love, but they find it too painful to receive love. You know?
Yes. And this, you know, I'm really seeing this now, and I do want to get on to this current times. But first, I just seeing this, that life really is just this constant changes. Like that's the only constant, is that life will keep changing. And with that is endings and then beginnings and endings and beginnings. And I think, you know, the greatest learning is to know that our natural way to be is to continually be evolving and changing.
Absolutely.
And so by allowing yourself to grieve, you know, in Chinese medicine, where I also trained in Chinese medicine, grief is about the lungs, and the lungs is about death and about letting go. And when we grieve, we let go of that version of ourself or that stage of our life or that belief that we have, and then it opens into something completely new.
Mm.
You know, like, isn't it remarkable watching people come through the other side? And it's like watching it's like a butterfly coming out of a cocoon, right?
Yeah, it's exquisite.
Yeah. So that process of going into the wound opens up the possibility of transformation.
Absolutely. And it's also that thing, Nicky, is like if you broke an arm, if someone breaks an arm, they trust that with the right support, a cast, and holding it in a sling, that they trust that the miracle of the human body, the miracle that bone will heal, it will merge, and it will come together again as whole.
Yes.
They trust that on a physical level, but they don't trust the miracle of the human and spiritual beings that we are, that you've got on an emotional level, that it's almost like if you believe in God or the universe or a higher power, that God would go, okay, I'll create it so that your leg will heal, but you won't be able to heal about any heartbreaks. It's like, it's just not going to happen. That we have a natural system as part of being human, as part of being spiritual beings, to heal our wounds. And that is really, where the magic is, but we don't trust it because of all the things that we've talked about.
Yes. And so that brings us perfectly to now. Here we are in this enormous unfolding. I don't think any of us can quite believe how big this really is. And with that is huge, huge levels of breaking down, not just our personal lives, but our future dreams. Some people are losing, whole businesses, their individual lives. There's a huge breakdown. And then on a collective level, there's breakdown. And so there's a lot of grief that's coming up and being invited to be processed. So can you speak about how we can how we can help people right now in changing the relationship to what's happening right now? So it's not just this terrible survival thing that we have to get through, but that we might be able to grow or heal through this in some way.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, Nicky, because if you don't have a spiritual dimension to your life, if you just have, this is it, there's a pandemic, look at us, we're all losing stuff. If you look at life through that lens, you're going to suffer, really, really suffer. And I understand that lens. As I said, I've lived it myself. But then when you bring in the spiritual dimension to global suffering, as we're going through, it brings with it a bigger and a deeper understanding of what is trying to happen here. And like you said, all the things that we've already talked about, but on a global level. Death, life as we know it, is dying as we have known it, for something, an opportunity for something to be reborn. But we can't jump fast track into the rebirth without the process of grief.
Exactly. We have to painfully, we have to be here first. We have to let it all crumble somehow. And my teacher always uses this saying, which I find very powerful, life can be a torture chamber or the greatest school you've ever been in. That's like, if we keep sort of trying to stop the breakdown, let me do whatever I can. Oh, it's so much suffering. It's so painful. I know that one too.
Yeah, exactly.
But the kind of courage that's required to just go, okay, let this happen somehow.
Yes.
Surrender.
And this is the thing, is that it really is, when I've been asked this question many times, and I'm not a traditionally religious person, and I have great respect for anybody that has that particular faith, but I have an absolute trust and faith in something bigger than us. That something more powerful, more knowing, more wise than little old me and little old you and all these other little people running around, and so I find when people ask me but how can I begin, and I say, on your knees, you know, and really for me that is a form of prayer, and prayer again, not to a traditional God unless that's meaningful to you, but really as an act of surrender and humility to get down on your knees and say, help me, I don't know how to do this, please help me.
Yes.
And my experience has shown me, and working with people for 30 years now, my own life experiences, when you really from a humble place ask for help, you will receive it. You will receive, some person will come in your life, some kind of guide, something will happen to you that will show you your next step, and maybe only be one step, but that will be enough to turn you into a different path, you know. So I think prayer is so important, and that act of surrender that you talked about. And then it is about learning to be with our feelings, you know, learning, you know, one of my great teachers, David Rico, he always says, you sit with a painful feeling a minute more than you can stand. And then the next day or the next hour, you sit with it 2 minutes, and then 3 minutes, and then you expand. And just like that beautiful example you gave when you were grieving the loss of your baby, is that it literally, as you expand into the grief, it works its magic on you, and it does what it's meant to do, and it's alchemy.
Wow.
You know, it really is alchemy.
God, you know, as you're speaking, I can just feel it all being activated. That it actually does feel like alchemy when you're in that process.
Yes.
It's like the fibers of all the holding on just starts dissolving and breaking down, and something in you just opens, expands, just so much bigger. And and it begins with one step. It begins
with one step, but it has to, you know, if you're trying to figure out your troubles and the global troubles with watching the news, reading the news, and from the neck up, good luck with that. You know, it really isn't. These are matters of the heart. They are matters of the soul. And so you can't, just as when a heart breaks, the only place that is the point of healing is the heart. And we go through the body to the heart. And it's the same. You cannot figure this out with your mind. Yes, of course, the mind has a role, but it's not going to provide the healing that you need. And that's why I really encourage people, in whatever way is meaningful for them, to develop a spiritual practice, whatever that means to you. I'm not interested in labels, but whatever that means to you, to find a way to build your resilience, your inner resilience, and your faith. Faith in what? That something bigger is trying to take place here, that we don't understand, and we're maybe not meant to understand.
Yes. So let's go into that a little bit more. Someone is at the cusp of losing their whole business, their whole dream, or what they thought was their dream. There's not much money in the bank, and they're on their knees. What can you advise them to begin taking on a new way of living, a spiritual practice? How can they begin?
So I think that, like I said, when you're on your knees, it's a good position to start praying, in whatever way you want to do that. And but then I think sometimes it's also having the humility to recognize that we need somebody to guide us at these points points where there is an opening, and the wound is open, and you can't see it as a portal, you just feel it as a wound, and we all know how painful that is that sometimes you need someone to hold your hand, and be that a mentor or a therapist or a coach, and, you know, somebody to kind of say, it's okay, you know, I'm gonna guide you, I'm gonna hold your hand as you come into a place of your own healing. So I think that sometimes people try to do the kind of warrior thing. Again, I know that one, of push on through. I'll face my wound. I'll thrash through this portal, you know, and it's like, it doesn't come. It's really, what we're talking about here is the divine feminine.
Yes.
You know, we're really talking about divine feminine energy, and you can't push through this toxic masculine energy, which we as women have also swallowed as well. So we really have to lean into divine feminine energy, and to go in and through from that place, and that includes men as well. But
asking for help, reaching out, allowing ourselves to receive.
Absolutely.
letting go of trying to be the warrior and doing it on your own, and trusting that through that, one step at a time, we can start moving in a new direction.
Absolutely. And you know, Nicky, the key role of gratitude, you know, when you are in emotional pain, you can forget to be grateful, and it's absolutely essential that you are grateful at that point.
Yes.
That you can feel your heart smashed into a million pieces and still look at the sky and see the beauty in that colour blue of that sky, or still look into your child's eyes and say, this child is here in this room with me as my heart smashes into a million pieces.
Yes.
Gratitude is a spiritual practice. You know, you want a simple start with gratitude, but it needs to be heartfelt. Has to land in the heart. Again, it's not, oh, I'm grateful for the trees.
I'm happy.
Yeah. No, that's not what we're talking about, is it? Absolutely.
If you can just even let that one moment land in your heart, it's like I always speak about, it's like that tiny crack of light that just starts to break through that dark room, and it just transforms the whole space with that light.
Absolutely. I know when recently you know, somebody had died. I didn't know them, but I knew of them, and I really felt the sadness of this person dying for some particular reason. It really touched me, and even though I didn't know them. And I remember I had a cup of coffee in front of me, and I was really, really crying, and it was obviously resonating with my own pain and loss, and I was really crying. And then I saw this cup that my friend had made for me, and it was just this huge gratitude of like, here I am drinking a delicious cup of coffee in this cup that was made for me with such love, and my heart is breaking.
Yes. You know, I think hindsight is such a gift, isn't it? When I look back now over the last 20 years for me, you know, every single moment that I have been courageous enough to allow myself to be on my knees and break has been the greatest moments of healing and transformation for me. And once you do the first time, there's a certain level of trust that's built.
Yeah, absolutely.
In life and in yourself.
Absolutely.
And so when it happens again, you're never that person who doesn't know that you can go through this.
Yes.
And I just think that human beings are the most remarkably powerful, resilient, just spirits. And if we just knew this, we are capable of growing through everything and healing so much. And I wouldn't change anything. You know, would you look back on any part of being on your knees, and would you change it if you could go back?
No. I've got my little fan going now because I'm hot.
I love your fan.
I wouldn't change any of it, Nicky. I wouldn't change one moment. And you know, anybody that has read about my life, and I've, you know, like many people, I've lived through a lot of trauma, and have experienced a lot of loss, which is why I'm so passionate about grief as this really, it's like a golden ticket, you know, Charlie's Chocolate Factory. It really is. And it's like, I wouldn't change any of it, because you and I would not be here having this conversation, doing the work that we're doing and that we believe passionately in, if we hadn't have experienced pain and suffering. And it is truly, I believe, you know, the wonderful Richard Rohr, he calls it necessary suffering, because human beings are creatures of comfort. If we don't suffer, we will not grow. If we don't grow, we will not evolve. You know, and we are here to grow, to learn, and to remember that we are love, you know, and so we need necessary suffering as part of that.
Yes, there's a beautiful saying in Chinese medicine: the bigger the front, the bigger the back. And I can really experience that in my life. You know, the greater the pain, the greater the capacity for love and compassion.
Yes, and joy. I mean, this is the thing, because sometimes when people say to, oh, you're the queen of grief, and they expect this sort of, you know, weary, kind of heavy, burdened woman to come in, and then I'm there and I'm full of joy and love.
So bright, joyful.
Because as you said, said, you know, it's so much light gets in when you dare to go there.
Yes.
You dare to have the courage to go there. Is just the light gets in and in and in, and you feel so much, because you've dared to feel so much deep grief. You just feel so much joy. I feel so joyous. We're alive, you know, and that is no small thing. And so I think, don't forget the joy. It's love, which is part of love, of course, anyway. But it's certainly, it sounds really heavy, but it's the irony of, and the beauty of it is that it results in such lightness. Such lightness.
Oh, I'm going to leave it at that. That is such a beautiful way to finish, and such an important thing for people to be reminded of and to know. And so I just want to thank you so much for coming to speak to me, and to all my soul surgery viewers and everyone who comes to watch this. When I think of you as the Queen of Grief, I just feel the power of your heart and your love, and because you really do have to love so big to hold that space for the grief. And so it's just been so wonderful to finally meet you and to feel your love across the screen.
Thank you so much, Nicky. Thank you. I really, really, I'm just very grateful for you asking me to speak about my passion, my subject of passion, which is grief.
Yes, and if anyone, when we're ready, when we're able to come back into like human meeting, please go and do the bridge. It is I've heard the most remarkable feedback about your transformational retreat. So many friends of mine have gone on it, and I just couldn't be a stan for it more. So thank you for doing that work.
Thank you. Yeah, it's like your work, Nicky. It's holding people's hand as they step through.
Yes.
And what more could we ask for? So.
Do you have any webinars or workshops that you are going to be offering soon that people can access online that we can talk about?
Yeah, I'm kind of, at the moment, I'm busy writing up some different things, because obviously online I'm very much you know, working with people face to face, usually like yourself. So I'm just doing some packages that we can offer online, and some different trainings and things, but the best way is to just either sign up for our newsletter, thebridgeretreat.com, or just check out, you know, on social media or whatever. So
amazing. Thank you. So I'll be putting all the links at the bottom of the page anyway, so everybody can access that. But thank you so much for coming. It's been wonderful.
Oh, it's been so nice to meet you. Thank you.
Okay.
Lots of love.